government is slavery. And this is true, and I'm going to explain why it's true, and I'm going to explain the solution to this condition. Trying to advance. It's not advancing. So I'll call for the advance. There you go. So that's the title. Next slide. I start my presentations off with some basic caveats, or warnings, if you will. You're not going to be seeing anything brand new here today. This knowledge has been around since time immemorial. A lot of people say, well, I've heard things like this before that you present. And yes, that's no surprise. You're not going to be seeing anything brand new here. As the old saying goes, there is nothing new under the sun. This saying means that truth is objective and eternal. It has always been with us. It always will be with us. It's whether we actually recognize it or not and put it into practice in our lives. All that I can do as a presenter is present the truth in a personalized framework with my own particular style and aesthetics applied to the presentation. Next slide, please. That being said, I don't sugarcoat my words or my delivery. And this presentation is for psychologically mature adults who are ready to hear hard truths spoken. So this is not for people who appear to be adults bodily, but are actually have the psychological mentation of a child who attempts to think and reason with their emotions. If you're that type of an emotional person, this information is probably going to be very difficult for you to hear, but guess what? That's okay. It's still true anyway. Next slide, please. So my presentation style is very direct. It's often very intense. Some people even describe it as combative, and that's okay. I don't sugarcoat my words or my delivery. Some people are very likely to become upset or angered by what I will say during this presentation, so be it. That will never make the material untrue, because truth by its very nature is belligerent, because it wages war against all forms of deception and mind control. Things that are very, very real and very actively taking place in our society. Telling the truth and making someone cry is far better than telling a lie and making someone smile. Next slide, please. Back it up one, please. No, forward, I'm sorry. So why do I personally do this work? I don't present this information to be liked, to be popular, to make money, or to make friends. I speak publicly because I recognize that in the crisis of overwhelming ignorance and deception in which we live, I have a personal moral obligation to communicate what I know to be taking place in our world in order to help others to understand it so that they can then take action and do something about it. I do the work that I do simply because it is the right thing to do. I don't have any fear of reprisal or consequence, even though I'll tell you some of my background in the presentation. Right is right even if everyone is against it. Wrong is wrong even if everybody is for it. So that's my personal motivation. Next slide, please. This is my website, whatonearthishappening.com. That's my logo. And next slide. I consider myself an abolitionist. I am for the eradication of human slavery. So I call myself different things. I'm an aggregator of information and ancient knowledge. I am a studier of the occult, which is my background. I consider myself a de-occultist. I am taking hidden knowledge from time immemorial in human civilization, and I am trying to take it out of hiding and explode it onto the world so that other people can make informed decisions with that information. But most of all, I consider myself an abolitionist. I stand against all forms of slavery. That's physical, that's spiritual, that's covert and overt forms of slavery. I think slavery is the abomination of all abominations. It is the most horrible crime that could ever be committed against any being. And I stand against that in all of its forms, and you should be an abolitionist too if you consider yourself a good and moral person. Next slide, please. So I'm going to present this presentation in 3 parts. Part 1 is the problem, or what I call the truth regarding the human condition. Part 2 is going to be why the problem persists. And part 3 is going to be the actual solution to solving the problem of human slavery. Next slide, please. So there is a truth regarding the human condition. The human condition is slavery. Now, how many people find that shocking to hear, by a show of hands? No one. People generally have an idea that something is incredibly wrong in our world, and this is what it is. There is violence, there is coercion, there is duress, and putting all of those things together, that equals slavery in a particular form. The form that it exists in right now, currently, is not what I call ball, chain, and shackle slavery. It is not chattel slavery. Chattel slavery, unfortunately, is still practiced in some areas of the world, obviously has been practiced in our past. Huge abomination, unbelievably immoral, should never, ever be tolerated. This is not the current form that slavery is taking to a large extent in our world. Next slide, please. This is the form that it is taking. The human condition is covert slavery, not overt ball, chain, and shackle, chattel slavery. It is a form of covert or hidden slavery that works through the mind. We are conditioned to believe false axiomatic premises and belief systems that then become an enslavement process. And that is where we find ourselves right now, in a prison of the mind, which is the worst form of slavery in many ways because it is the most difficult to see and it is the most difficult to conquer. But that is the human condition. Next slide, please. The form of slavery that we are experiencing is called government. Government is a covert form of slavery built upon a false axiom. An axiom is a fundamental belief system that is held very, very, very deeply in the mind. It is rooted. It has deep roots in the mind. It has deep roots in the emotions and in the psyche of people who believe in this belief system. The belief system or axiomatic premise that all forms of government throughout all of human history is based upon is the belief in authority. Government is authority. It is not suggestion. It is telling people that you must comply, you must obey. You must turn over whatever resources we tell you must turn over. You must cease and desist in enacting rights if we tell you you may not enact them. And we saw this all through the COVID nonsense, that we all just went through. The very idea of human authority is an illusion. It's an illusion and a delusion. For one to believe in it, they must be delusional and willing to believe in that which is not real. Authority is a claim and a false one at that. It is an illusion of a diseased psyche. It is a form of mental illness, the belief in authority. It is based entirely in violence. That's the only thing that backs up the claim of authority is violence. And it is built upon the erroneous, dogmatic, religious belief. Authority is a false religion. Make no mistake about it. And the religious belief is that some people are masters who have the moral right to issue commands, while other people are their slaves who have a moral obligation to obey their master's commands. These are called, of course, laws. The concept of authority is actually the most dangerous religion that has ever existed upon the face of the earth. And it has temples, rituals, symbols, just like any other cultural religion. This is a new covert religion. People don't think of it as religion, yet that's exactly what authority and government are. They are diseased religious belief systems that must be purged from the mind as the mental, psychological, and spiritual viruses that they actually are. Next slide, please. My question, see, we could analyze this in a myriad of different forms, right? We could look at taxation, the confiscation by force, by duress, of the fruit of the labor of another. You know, and people have analyzed that. Well, what percentage of it is not slavery? If 100% confiscation of human labor is slavery, can we reduce it to 95 and it no longer be slavery? Can we reduce it to 50% and it's not slavery anymore magically? No, only 0 would not be slavery anymore. Okay? We can analyze it from a perspective of, prohibition against substances you can put in your body. Well, if you don't have bodily autonomy to put into it what you wish or to not have put into it what you don't want in it, then your body belongs to another. This should be simple common sense. Unfortunately, most people don't see it that way. And those who don't are incorrect. We can look at licensure and a host of other things. But common sense really dictates that we only ask one true question. Has the very concept of authority ever been a moral concept? Has it ever been actually backed or based in morality? Okay? So, next slide, please. This is the old variant of authority. Okay? You have a hierarchical and compartmentalized structure with a king at the top. Next slide, please, or build. This was called, in the ancient world, kingship or royalty. It is authority vested in one being that considers themselves the sovereign, the ruler, the master. This was called the Old World Order, because the Old World Order was ruled by this form of authority. It was overt. Everybody knew who the king was. Everybody knew that if you crossed the king's demands or laws or wishes, the henchmen of the king came after you and killed you, or did brutal violence unto you. So this is the Old World Order. Eventually, people tired of living under kings and queens and experiencing their violence directly and overtly. Next build, please. So this is the new form of authority. It's the same structure, except at the top, instead of one being, there's an oligarchical few. So nothing has changed. The only thing that is different is that the quote-unquote authority has been divested into a few beings instead of vested in one. Next build. This is called government, of course. This is authority vested in few, or an oligarchy, a few rulers. This is the New World Order. But you see, the new religion is exactly the same as the old religion. Nothing has changed except the name, and it has been euphemized